they're the noisiest next to the percussion, so their sound is going to reach you after the violas. So taking into account that there's delay compensation between all the instruments and also the space in which they're in, the violins can be, the left center, violas, cellos to the right, double bass, etc. You've got to make sure that the layout, everything has to be as realistic as it can get to a photograph of what an orchestra looks like.
Wow, that's amazing. That is super detailed.
It is. I mean, obviously it goes more than that. Those are like the few of the surface level things that as a starting point. But it's so critical to make sure that you implement all those things. Otherwise, you won't. It'll sound good. Don't get me wrong. It'll still sound good, but it won't give you that edge of making people think, hang on, that's got to be real, because that's what you want. I don't want people to start thinking, yeah, he did this in the box. I want people to think this is an orchestra, and I think, thank goodness I have been blessed on a number of occasions to have had people tell me that it sounded definitely real.
When you're playing the parts on MIDI, are you doing some of those automation things in real time, or are you doing it after the fact?
Yeah, a lot of the time I'll actually, when I record the MIDI in the first place, I'll perform the automation I want in real time. But then more often than not, I will go back and perfect it afterwards, because a lot of the time there's a lot of fine tuning which I can't do in real time when I'm performing it. At least I would say CC1, the mod wheel, I will do a lot of that in real time, but depends. Sometimes I'll leave it because I'm happy with the way it sounded the first time and that's it. But sometimes I'll go back and I'll erase it and I'll write in the data again, or I'll record the data again, in real time. You can let the MIDI play and then I'll just write over the MIDI with the modulation wheel.
Got it. So is there anything you do in your productions that you think gives you a trademark sound?
I really don't know, because a lot of the productions that I've done so far have been very varied in their genre. Probably in my electronic music, I think in terms of the way that the percussion department grooves, I often throw in a few bells and whistles that you might find consistency throughout my electronic music that I've done. Or maybe some of the chord progressions that I use, they tend not to be too standard. I try to keep things as interesting as I can, as least as I can get away with.
Amazing.
But I don't know. You'd have to listen and try and see if you can spot any similarities between the music that I've done. But
all right, man, I'll have a listen.
I really don't know if there's anything too specific. I just try to give it an edge and try to make it sound interesting. That's what I try to do with it.
Love it. How do you balance your creative vision with the artist that you're working with?
Yeah, so as far as achieving a vision with an artist, it's important that we both understand what the common goal is. And generally, they will send me a reference track or a couple of reference tracks to artists which they listen to, or their favorite artist, or a song that really appeals to them and they want it to sound like that. So I will have a good listen to that, and I'll do some analysis on what I'm hearing, and then I will bounce that analysis off the artist, and then we'll pick out the elements that we like the most, and then I will start to try and recreate those elements and aspects in my project with them. And then from then it's a continuous feedback loop of creativity, because they'll say yay or nay when I pull up an idea. If they don't like it, I'll toss it in the bin, and if they do like it, I'll keep it there and then make the adjustments later.
Awesome. So who mixes and masters the music you create?
I tend to do the mixing myself. The mixing phase can either happen during or after, but most of the time it happens during. I'm one of those people that will mix as I go.
Sure.
And so eventually by the end of the project, it will probably be almost fully mixed. And then I'll leave it for a week or something, or a couple of days at least, and then listen to it again. And then I'll make some serious corrections, which I wasn't making earlier because I wasn't aware of them. Because you get used to hearing the same thing too many times. You miss out some of the finer details which you should have spotted earlier on if you were listening more objectively. But because you're listening during the creativity process, then you tend to miss out a lot of the things that you could have spotted earlier. That's just me. Not saying everyone's like that. So mixing will happen generally during and after. Mastering, it's always better, I find, to have it sent to someone for mastering, because a fresh pair of ears and a new perspective, you can't do that yourself.
Absolutely.
But at the end of the day, what happens sometimes is that there isn't sufficient budget for the mastering. So the way I'd approach it generally when I'm mastering, or sometimes, is that I will leave the song alone for at least a week. Won't listen to it at all. Then I'll listen to it once on a fresh pair of ears, and then just write a list of things that I want changing. And generally speaking, they're things that you'll change in the mix. They're not things that you'll change in a master, or, the idea of the master is to improve what's already there, take a take a great sounding mix and make it fantastic.
Yeah.
So that's what I'll do. I'll listen to the mix, on a fresh pair of ears after a week of not listening to it at all, make notes, and then make mix corrections if they're necessary. But at the same time, I'll also make notes on what I'd like to sound bigger or more improved on, and then I'll go to mastering myself, with that mindset, listening to it totally objectively. If at any point in time I'm thinking, that snare really is ringing too much in the low mids or whatever, then that's it. Mastering session is now over. Go back to the mix, fix the problem, get the mix sounding great, and then take another break and then listen to it again. Because I can't force my brain to forget what it's heard already. I can only just take a listening break and then listen to it with a semi-new perspective. I'm basing this off what I studied when it came to mastering, because I did study mastering in music school here, but then I did an additional mastering course, which was a good few months just on mastering from Ian Shepherd in London.
He's got a great podcast also on
his
mastering.
Podcast is unbelievable. I mean, he goes deep.
I gobbled up like the first 20 episodes.
Oh yeah, he goes
maybe
deep.
like a year and a half ago or something.
He goes fantastically deep into mastering, every aspect, and he's like literally he's someone who I definitely bounce off, and he's my first point of reference when it comes to getting to grips with any questions I have for mastering. But I did his mastering course, which was
no doubt, I considered it, and I balked at the price. So
yeah, no, it's not cheap, but I did it, and I was quite blown away at what the perspective that he gives, and the listening tools that he gives you is for someone who's really, I'm saying, because I've really studied to a degree mixing and production, so to have his whole perspective on mastering in such a holistic fashion was really eye-opening. And after having done that course, it really gave me an entirely different perspective. I really do feel that I can just objectively look at my music in a holistic fashion when it comes to doing any home mastering that I might need to do. Whether it's my projects or projects that other people have sent me, obviously it's way better to have it sent to a mastering house and pay, a good amount of money for someone in a perfectly tuned room, or as good as you can get, rather, to listen to it and then, do it for you. But if that's not possible, then, you can do it yourself. Just take into account that you got to make sure that you're not being fooled by your own perspective from,
right,
based on what you might have heard beforehand.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing advice. So do you have anybody in particular that you send out to if you do send out to mastering? And if you are sending out to someone else to master, do you include anything on your stereo bus whatsoever? I've
had stuff sent to Katie Tavini in the past, and she did a wonderful job at mastering it. To be honest, I know that the mastering process isn't a whole lot. It's very subtle, but those subtleties really add up, and it just gave the track a really good facelift. But it was a good mix. I feel it was a good mix to start with anyway. But again, when it comes to things like electronic music, so there's a whole lot of places you can send it to. Ultimately, I'd only ever want to send it to someone who is well experienced in the electronic music world, and someone who is definitely in tune with what kind of sound most dance music is going for nowadays. Because a lot of the dance tracks that we get they're pretty smashed, and being smashed by a series of limiters, that's part of the sound nowadays. And I know people complain about, there being hardly any dynamic range, or, it's aggressive, or that you can hear some kind of distortion. And they're like, a lot of the time, that's just the flavor that people want to go for. And, more power to them. It's an artistic thing. So if I'm sending dance music off to anyone, I would try and pick someone who really, is able to understand.
Bring that out.
Yeah, understand what I'd like from it at the end of the day. But ultimately, it really depends on the mix, because you have to make sure that you've built your mix to be mastered, as it were. You can't have a really dynamic, gentle mix and then say, right, now turn it into a huge big room banger, because you haven't provided enough material for it to become that in the first place. So I'd say you have to always make sure that you engineer your mix to sound like the master, and then the master will take it that one step further. So
you are doing some stereo bus processing in the mixing stage.
Yes, as far as stereo bus processing goes, occasionally, I might have an analog emulation compressor on my master bus, on my stereo bus rather, which is doing some very, very gentle compression, very gentle, about 1 dB, if that, 1 or 2 dB. That's occasionally something that I might leave on the stereo bus. In the past, having done an acoustic mix, I might have one or two things. There might be some very, like literally to about 5%, 10% tape saturation, and maybe some gentle harmonic
excitement.
Yeah, harmonic excitement, using one of the Brainworks plugins or something. But, talking about, literally not more than like 15%, like very subtle. And then some very gentle stereo, very gentle compression, slow attack time,
fast release,
just literally just to give it some cohesion at the end when it comes out. And I mix with the compression on, and then the excitement and harmonic excitement I'd probably add on afterwards, and the tape saturation just to give it a little bit more flavor, as it were. Because like the idea is for me not to create a pre-master or anything like that. I'm just adding things which I feel complement the mix. That's the idea. I want my mix to sound as perfect as I can possibly get it in the mix phase before it goes to mastering, because then there won't be much for the mastering engineer to do. That's the idea.
Amazing. I love that. Is there anything I didn't ask you about that you'd like to maybe share with the audience? Some advice for someone coming up and trying to get into this.
Okay, so first big thing would be this. If you're the kind of person who's going to be, monitoring on your speakers and recording people, and, you want to start doing mixing it in your room, whatever, first and foremost, invest in acoustic treatment for your environment. Okay, do not skimp on acoustic treatment, because without acoustic treatment, you are going to be hearing stuff that's not there, and it's going to totally impact your mixing skills especially if they're developing. So always make sure that you invest in room treatment. And if you can't afford the room treatment, at least get yourself a decent pair of headphones that are going to give you an uncolored perspective on what you're doing, because that's really, really important. That's one of the things I'm very fussy about, I'd say. The other thing is get to grips with the basic tools. You'd be surprised. You might be surprised to hear this, but most of the heavy lifting that I do in my projects, I'm using stock plugins for most of what I do. I really am. I use the channel strip that comes included with Cubase. I use the onboard compressors, EQs, saturation, gates, you name it. I'm using the stock stuff that it comes with to get most of the stuff out of the way. And then I literally have my collection, my plugin collection is quite small, to be honest. I mean, people go running after plugins like the Holy Grail. Don't do that. Don't waste money investing in tons and tons of plugins that you might not even know how to use properly or effectively to start with, because it's not worth it. First, get to grips with the basic functions of what's included, because I think every DAW comes with at least an EQ, a compressor, and, of some kind. Or even multiple, and there's a reason why they're stock plugins. They are definitely going to do the job 100% flawlessly. There's going to be zero latency, no incompatibility issues. There's going to be nothing wrong with them. First, get good at using those before going out on a limb to get something more interesting or different. Unless there's like tools that you require that are not included in your DAW, then fine, that's another thing altogether. Then you're purchasing a specific tool for a specific use. But in general, try to get the most out of your stock plugins before you start, getting all the mad bundles from Waves and, Plugin Alliance, etc.
Yeah, totally. So how can our audience find out a bit more about you?
Instagram is where I tend to post flying bits of audio here and there. I've got some information about me on my Sound Better profile, and I don't post a whole lot at the moment on Facebook, but I do upload content there. For the most part, I'm mostly active on Instagram, to be honest. That's where I'm most active. But obviously, I'm definitely contactable by email.
Do you mind sharing your email on the podcast, just in case someone wants to shoot you a message?
Yeah, sure. My email is dubfredmusic. That's DUBFREDMUSIC, dubfredmusic@gmail.com.
Amazing. So, Freddie, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, and you shared some amazing insights. And yeah, it was good to get to meet you face to face, at least on Skype. Yeah, and hopefully we'll meet up in person soon, and we can grab a coffee or something.
It's been awesome. Yeah, thank you, and appreciate you having me on the podcast. It's great.
For sure, dude. So keep up the great work, and we'll be in touch.
Absolutely.
All right, man. Take care.
Thank you. All the best.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Secret Sonics. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Freddie as much as I did. If you enjoyed this episode or any of our other episodes, I would really appreciate it if you would go to iTunes and leave us a rating and review. That really helps the podcast move forward. In addition to that, you can subscribe on your favorite podcast app, and you could find out more at secretsonics.co, where you can also choose an app to subscribe to on. As always, I'm open to your feedback, and I would love to hear from you at secretsonics@gmail.com, where you can let me know what you want to hear about and who you want to hear from. Also, don't forget to subscribe to us on social media. We're on Facebook and Instagram. Just search for Secret Sonics. That about wraps it up for this episode. So thank you so much for tuning in again. And until next time, hope you guys have a great week and dig in.